In this video, I want to talk to you about quadratics and what quadratics are and ways to multiply the factors of quadratics as well as to factor the quadratics. So those are three things that I'm going to do. So the first thing I want to point out to you is a quadratic, the parent function is f of x is equal to x squared. So why do we call this a quadratic? Well, the word quadratic actually comes from the root quad, as in quadrilateral. So if you know what a quadrilateral is from geometry, it's basically a rectangle. Okay? So quadratic is giving us the area of the rectangle. So if I'm to look at the rectangle here that I drew, this has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 boxes across. So that length is 5, and this length is 2. So if we multiply them together, we end up getting an area of 10. So that's the sort of thing that we're doing with quadratics. So if we have x squared, that means that I have some length and some width that's the same. So x times x gives me the area of x squared. So that's why we call it a quadratic, because a quadratic will form some sort of quadrilateral when we look at it geometrically. Okay, so let's look at something that we might be given. We might be given the factors 2x plus 1 times 3x minus 4. So these are factors. So I'm going to say this is a factor, and this is a factor. So we know what are factors. Factors are numbers that, when multiplied, gives the product of those numbers. So that's a lot of words. So what does that mean? So my factors here, 2 times 5, these are factors. Those are factors of 10. Because if we multiply those two together, we get 10. Okay, so let's look at this because we have some unknown in here, so we have to leave it like that. So I'm going to set up a box, and I'm going to have 2x, and I'm going to have plus 1, and then I'm going to have 3x, and I'm going to have negative 4. So remember, my quadrilateral is the area of the quadratic. So now what I'm going to do is find this area. So 2x times 2x is 6x squared. 1 times 3x gives me 3x. 2x times negative 4 gives me negative 8x. And 1 times negative 4 gives me negative 4. So remember, when I'm multiplying these together, I'm looking for the area of my quadrilateral, which means I have to add up all these little areas in here. So that gives me 6x squared plus 3x minus 8x minus 4. Here I have like terms, so I'm going to combine them. So my final answer is 6x squared minus 5x minus 4. So this here, that is the product of 2x plus 1 times 3x minus 4. Okay, So that is going from factors to the actual quadratic. So now we're going to do it backwards with a different problem. So let's look at this quadratic. Now notice I'm just looking at an expression. Later on we will look at an equation. So once you know how to factor expressions, you'll be golden. So I have the quadratic 2x squared minus 19x plus 24. Okay? And so I'm asked to factor. So what I'm asking for is what two binomials, and I haven't used that word before, so let's look back here. This here is a binomial, and this here is also a binomial because it has two terms, one term and the second term, one term and the second term. So each of those are binomials. So I'm looking for the two binomials that will multiply together to give me this quadratic. The first question I need to ask myself, is there a greatest common factor? In other words, is there a number that I can divide out of all three terms? And the answer is no. I can't divide a 2 out because I cannot divide 2 out of 19. I can only divide a 2 out of the first term and the last term. It has to be all three terms. So the answer is no. There's no greatest common factor. Okay, so what am I going to do now? The second thing I'm going to do is I'm going to draw this x. So I just want to point out to you that this whole column through here is my thinking column, and then I'll go back here and complete my work. So this top part, this is going to be, I'm going to put a multiplication sign there because what am I going to do? I'm going to take my first term and my last term and I multiply them together. So I'm just going to do this little pink box here. This is just to help me show you what's happening. So 2x squared times 24. So I'm going to multiply those two together, and I get 48x squared. Okay? And the factors, which I'm going to put here, my factors are going to go here, have to add up, so I'm going to put plus there, to negative 19x. So this here is just helping me to figure out what my factors are. So I'm going to underline this negative 19 because that is what goes right there. Okay? So what I'm looking for, what's important, is what I get right here. My factors. I'm looking for my factors of 48. So the yellow is what's very important. Everything else is just helping me figure it out. Okay. So now you're probably saying, oh, I don't know my factors of 48. No problem. So you're going to take your calculator and go to y equals. And in y equals, I'm going to put in just the number 48, and I'm going to divide it by x. So that's going to do 48 divided by 1, 48 divided by 2. So I get all my factors. Okay. So I want my factors that add up to negative 19. As I'm looking here and I'm adding these up, I say 3 and 16 equal 19. Ah, so close but so far. I want negative 19. Not a problem. Wouldn't negative 3 and negative 16 also give me negative 19? In fact, those are factors up here. So I'm going to write negative 3x and negative 16x, because negative 3x times negative 16x gives me 48x squared. Negative 3x plus negative 16x gives me negative 19x. If this little x thing does not work, it means we cannot factor, and we'd have to use a quadratic formula. But we're not there yet, so we're not going to worry about it. So I'm going to show you two ways to do this. So if you remember, here, our quadratic makes a quadrilateral. We had our factors on the outside, and we had our area of the quadratic in the inside. I'm going to do the same thing here, but backwards, because factoring, I'm going to write this down for you, factoring is the opposite, and I'm going to put that in quotes, of multiplying. So we had multiplied in the previous example, but in this one we are going to be factoring. So I'm going to make my box. And I'm going to fill it with 2x squared. Now what I want to point out is that this yellow thing here is taking the place of this purple thing. Okay? So instead of writing negative 19x, I'm going to write negative 3x, negative 16x, and then 24. Okay? So basically what I did was I took this and I rewrote it to be, and I'll rewrite it at the top, 2x squared minus 3x minus 16x plus 24. So these problems, these are exact same expression. Okay. So now I'm going to ask myself, well, how do I get 2x squared? Well, I know x times x is going to give me x squared. But I have to decide, I know my factors of 2 are 2 and 1. So I have to decide, do I put the 2 here or do I put the 2 here? So this requires a little bit of thinking. If I put the 2 here, what would I multiply 2x by to get negative 3x? That's not going to work. So I'm going to put the 2 here and make that a 1x. So 2x times 1x is 2x squared. So what am I going to multiply 1x by to get negative 3x? Negative 3. So what I have one factor right here. That's one of my factors. I'm almost done with this one. So what am I going to multiply 2x by to get negative 16x? Negative 8. So let's check this last box. Is negative 3 times negative 8 positive 24? It is. So that means my factors are 2x minus 3 times x minus 8. Okay. Sometimes this gets a little tricky. We can't get it to work out. We got to switch things around. So I want to show you what I think is a better method. So we'll do the same exact thing we did before. Okay? We're going to do this x thing. Okay? So let's just go ahead and I'm just going to rewrite this. 2x squared minus 19x plus 24. Okay? So I'm set up my box. I'm going to do it again because this thinking out part is very important. I have 2x squared times 24. That was my first and my last term, right? I had multiplied those together and I got 48x squared. Okay, so this is what I multiplied together, and now I want that to add to what? Negative 19x, which was my center term, right? Now, nothing in this x thing is of any importance. What I'm looking for, again, are my factors of 48x squared that is going to add up to negative 19. And we saw that that was negative 3x and negative 16x. Okay? So what I want to point out is this is what's important, and that is taking the place of negative 19. So I'm going to rewrite this to be 2x squared minus 3x minus 16x plus 24. Okay, so I'm going to color code this for you. This is what came from this part of my box, and it's taking the place of negative 19x. Okay, so negative 19x is exactly the same as negative 3x and negative 16x. So this is what we're going to do with this. I'm going to rewrite this so we can see this clearer. Just going to copy it. So now what we're going to do is we're going to factor by grouping. So I'm going to put a line down like this. So this is my first group, and this is my second group. So I'm going to look at my first group. What's a common factor between 2x squared and negative 3x? Well, there's nothing in common between the 2 and the negative 3. There's no common factors. But both of them have an x. So I can divide out an x. That means my x is going to come in the front. Okay? And so then when I do 2x squared divided by x, I get 2x. And when I get negative 3x divided by x, I get negative 3. Okay. So basically what I did was I undistributed, and I got this. So I'm going to write undistribute. Okay. And now I'm going to do the same thing with this. I'm going to look at these. I'm going to say, what is the greatest common factor between these two here? Okay, well, I can factor out an 8. Okay, in fact, I'm going to factor out a negative 8. So let's say you don't know, though. Let's go back to the calculator and let's find our factors. I know this video is getting a little long. I'm trying to be quick with it. So we're going to go on our plain screen here, and we're going to go to math, and we're going to go to numbers. I believe, I might be wrong. We're going to go to math. Yeah, we're going to go to numbers, and we're going to look for greatest common divisor, which is number 9. Greatest common divisor is greatest common factor. Okay, so we're going to push enter, and what are the two numbers that we're interested in? We're going to put in 16 and 24 because the calculator doesn't like a negative. So it's 16, comma, 24, close that parentheses, and we see that 8 is our greatest common factor. So that means I'm going to be able to take an 8 out of both terms. This doesn't have an x, so I cannot take out an x. The one thing I want to point out is that if this is negative, right here, you always factor out a negative. So this has to be negative 8. So I'm factoring out a negative 8, right? That's undistributing. And then what do I have left? Well, this here is going to give me 2x. And when I divide 24 by negative 8, I get negative 3. So something very interesting has happened here. Notice that the 2x negative 3 and 2x negative 3 are exactly the same. That's what we want. That's our other check, which means those are common factors. 2x minus 3 and 2x minus 3. So I can factor those out. Notice that there's a lot of undistributing going on here. So that's 2x minus 3. Okay, so that came out in the front. So what do we have left in here? Well, what do we have left? We have an x and we have a negative 8. So what I want to show you is 2x minus 3 divided by 2x minus 3. That divides out to 1, and that divides out to 1. So we're left with x minus 8. I got the same exact answer here. as I did up here using the box method. You might prefer the box method, but I encourage you to do this method because this method is going to help you with other types of factoring, and it's very straightforward. You have a check here. If this works, you're good. You have a check here. If this factor and this factor are the same, you know you did it correctly. For this one here, the only real check you have is do these multiply in, and sometimes you're doing a lot of guessing and checking, which makes it a little frustrating. So for a while I'm going to have you do both methods until you find the one that you prefer.